real-time kind of cloud-based login from anywhere, tracking on your environmentals in each and every one of the grow rooms is an essential thing these days, because things can, lights can stay on overnight and the HVAC can stay off overnight, and you can cook out those plants real easy if you didn't know about it.
How's it going, Jordan?
Chilling, dude. Every day, working in cannabis.
Nice.
Yeah,
back in Colorado.
Yep. There's a ton of snow on the ground still. I don't think it's going anywhere for a couple of weeks.
Okay. Nice.
So yeah. But yesterday was 0 degrees. Living the dream still there too. You know what I mean? I'm from Texas. We never even had seasons. So
yeah, just maybe start off with a question. How should any new operator go about learning the basics to properly design their facility, and what are the key decisions that they need to make?
Well, I mean, with that kind of thing, it starts from like almost a foundational type of argument, and it's looking at like, what are you trying to do in the facility? You're trying to grow plants. You're not trying to like house people in an office or anything like that. So, you really got to think about how that relates to the equipment and what you need in that facility, and how those things are integrated together. So, really need to think about it from a system-wide perspective. Not only from that standpoint, but from a standpoint of like, this has to align with, your business plan, and stuff like that. So, some growers, they grow, straight up for, fresh frozen and for an extract market, right? And that may change, how you would design a, facility, to produce that, given the scheduling and everything else, that, you can design into the facility, right? These facilities are supposed to, I like to say like, the operation or the facility should complement the operations as opposed to the other way around. Just because, you find a lot of times that folks move into some spaces and just kind of make it work. Whereas, you can kind of, consider your SOPs, consider what you're doing in those facilities, growing plants. It's controlled environment agriculture at the base level. And, make a couple of minor changes, either on the build out side or the operational side that can, mitigate some of those things. Mm-hmm. So, and it's also like, you got to look at it from a standpoint of where is the facility, right? Like, been in a bunch of different states and a bunch of different rules within those states and everything along those lines where, sometimes the limiting factor, like common ones across all states, I mean, it's going to be like a budgetary thing, right? Or like a existing building, what can we do with that? In terms of the regulations, sometimes it's about, your square foot of canopy in flower, right? Illinois is a good example where, the craft growers starting with 5,000 square foot in flower and expandable up to 14,000 basically dictates, the size of facility that you're going to build. Right. But there's also a mindset where it's, you're basically building a factory, and there are some either post-processing or ancillary type of needs with what you're actually, the plants that you're growing there that you got to consider too. So like storage in the facility, and all of the other rooms that are going to, support what you're trying to produce as a product at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So if that's dried flower, you're going to need dry rooms. I've seen too many times on plans with like folks that normally do like town halls and stuff where it's like, dude, there's not even a dry room in this place. Yeah.
You need the storage facility.
I guess they're doing fresh frozen, but along those lines, where's the freezers? You know what I mean? Like, so it's having that full kind of systematic approach to, every step in the process, that you're trying to achieve in these buildings. Mm-hmm. So,
and do you think, depending on if somebody, let's say we're deciding between greenhouse versus fully indoor, how does that affect, your decision when looking for a space or a building or even land to buy?
Well, I mean, the greenhouse versus indoor argument is like super, complicated, right? So, there's a big kind of, common thought out there where it's, greenhouse flower is going to be a lesser quality than indoor flower, right? I don't think that's the case, but you got states like California that have you marked, like this grown outdoor, this is mixed light, this is indoor. And that automatically like takes up places on shelves, right? Just with that conception. So, but on the flip side, you see like those like name brands like your Willie's Reserves and some like the Mike Tyson brands and stuff like that. I guarantee you. But I know for a fact that there's a lot of that flower that's being grown in greenhouses and nobody knows. It's just about branding. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's no reason that product quality thing should be different between like the greenhouses and indoor, given that the greenhouses are relatively sealed and stuff like that. It just takes a little bit of a different approach and a little bit of a different approach even to the operational side, because indoor you're basically trying to replicate nature and control nature to a certain degree on these plants in which the area in which they're living. In the greenhouse, most often you're introducing some outside air and things like that, whether it be filtered or not. You're still kind of working with nature as opposed to just trying to control it outright, right? Mm-hmm. So, there's a couple concerns when it comes to building out the greenhouse and serving it with all of the equipment you're going to need there in terms of like your lighting and HVAC and whatnot. One of the things that's overlooked, like on the greenhouse side, is that you're dealing with insulation, right? Incoming solar radiation that's coming through, the greenhouse film. And a lot of times that stuff is not considered on the like HVAC side. So, you find that folks are struggling with, when they get to operations, they're struggling with kind of keeping the parameters within range and things like that in the greenhouse. And if you really boil it down, I mean, it looks to be, given the seasonality and stuff like that, with the sun going up and down or whatever, that's one thing that's overlooked, and it should be considered like whenever you're building out and specifying the HVAC for that greenhouse. So, mm-hmm. There's a couple of different concerns, but like I say, man, I know some like really top shelf name brand stuff that's grown in greenhouses and nobody knows, right? Mm-hmm. Also from the energy perspective, you should be able to optimize, all usage in that greenhouse. Now the HVAC side, given the offset that you need to do to, the actual sunlight that's coming through, is a little bit more of a concern on that side versus indoor. But at the same time, for a majority of the year, you're going to be, if anything else, like saving energy on your lighting, saving energy on that HVAC because your lighting's not running and things like that, depending on what the intensity of the sunlight is when it comes through the greenhouse roof. So, the smart thing to do in a greenhouse is to, use what's there for the benefit and kind of omit the negatives. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and when I'm talking about that, I mean the environment outside, both in sunlight and in temperature, humidity. Yeah. If you're right next to a hemp farm or something like that, I would absolutely, if you want to do a greenhouse, seal that thing, just for pollen's sake and things like that. So, yeah, that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's, that's where.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We kind of got on a tangent there about indoor versus greenhouse, but no, that's all good. I think the main thing I guess I want to pull back on is, your background, after you were involved with the initial Colorado market and then, kind of sold that off with Rocky Mountain Green. How'd you get into focusing only or, mostly with your current firm on facility design, as well as, what type of clients do you work with now and what's kind of your specialty?
Yeah, totally. So like, Everything that we kind of achieved with Rocky Mountain Green back in the day was, I mean, you can't talk about it without talking about where it was, and it was in Colorado. It was in Boulder County here. So Boulder County has some specific kind of fees and things associated with operating in the county, as well as like, the nug that we were trying to sell was like, back in the day, it was $900 a pound on the wholesale market, or $800 a pound. It got down to those levels. So the biggest thing that I learned at that place was to make that profitable. So it was about low COGS. It was about looking at every efficiency and everything else. Now, after Rocky Mountain Green was sold, I kind of just naturally fell into helping folks do this sort of thing, and it started with a couple of buddies in Denver and in Colorado Springs and Pueblo, just around Colorado. But I've been doing it now since 2018, focusing on these optimized designs for the cultivation, even the laboratory and the dispensary side. For 4 years or so now. So, man, when I say I'm living the dream, I'm just kind of applying the things that I learned at Rocky Mountain Green, and really trying to help folks with something that really helps me personally. So, but yeah, I mean, the most common things, it falls into the facility design category. There's a lot of SOP work that I do with folks. General consulting, and just getting these businesses stood up as if they are in a market that has that price compression already, that I kind of more or less grew up in Colorado. So, the way that I look at it, all these facilities, if you're in Jersey or New York or Illinois, Michigan, even many other markets, it's like, if you can start your cost of goods sold on that flower that you're growing from a very low rate, then you have a competitive advantage from the beginning, well, before any kind of price compression happens or state lines fall or whatever it may be. So I think those are the folks that are going to be, like I say, sustainable kind of going forward with that, price compression and stuff. So.
Sustainable doesn't just mean environmentally sustainable, but also, economically, financially.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it means both, really. And one can't live in the world of the other, almost, from what I've seen, given, cannabis cultivation is a really energy intensive process, right? So what I always tell people is like, look, you can only do so much, because you can't sacrifice the sustainability of the business on the altar of the sustainability of the environment, because your business will not work. You know what I mean? So, luckily nowadays, we have, all kinds of technology and stuff like that's really come along that are, attacking those efficiencies and stuff. So like LED lighting, VRF hardware on the HVAC side, indoor air handlers, really efficient dehumidification. And not only that, but, scheduling the grow rooms in these facilities to not only complement the operations that you're expecting indoors or in the greenhouse or whatever, but you're also scheduling those rooms to create more of a baseline in terms of your energy use. And what that'll translate to at the end of the month, end of the year, is, you've used less energy costs. There's less of an energy cost given, peak demand and stuff like that, over the course of that year for every pound of flower that you grew, right? Because everything is going to boil down to COGS. Two biggest things are going to be labor and energy. Right.
Yep. Totally.
So from the energy perspective, it's about, putting in lights that are of the right spectrum and intensity, that have a spread that you have mapped out, right? You're mapping that out. And exactly what those plants are gonna be receiving. You know what I mean? But you're not kind of just using a rule of thumb where it's like you need to have a fixture every 4 by 4 feet. You know what I mean? So stuff like that is really, it turns out to be effectual over the long term. And that's, not not only good for sustainability of the environment, but sustainability of that business in and of itself. So just so happens that those two things run hand in hand. And that was my primary background. I got my degree in environmental sustainability and a couple of things around that. So,
okay, nice. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk next about the different environmental hardware sources out there in the market and kind of how to go about or reason about those decisions. But real quickly, when somebody kind of comes to, your company, Stauderfish, and inquires about your facility design, and let's say they move forward because they're applying for several licenses in the new market, what do you think is typically the gaps or, pitfalls that you'll see that people usually have in their knowledge, that, you need to make sure that they get on the same page as quickly as possible?
A lot of it is the kind of flower canopy is one thing, and you can kind of figure that out when it comes to how to accommodate that inside of a facility. But the propagation space, the kind of space you need for mothers, clones, and things like that, veg, dry, trim space, storage space, the space you're going to need for kind of your water storage on site, and dealing with utilities there, and your fertigation, as well as like the electrical and whatnot. You start to realize after kind of being in a lot of these places where it's like, man, the one thing that was considered is let's pack as many plants as we can in there. And yes, we're trying to do that, but at the same time, we still got to consider how the facility is going to be operated. So one of the biggest things that I see that is overlooked whenever just kind of stepping into a project there is those ancillary spaces are lacking. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's no kind of you're relying upon a water source when you're taking the water directly out of a pipe, filtering it and sending it to plants. But sometimes there's no consideration towards what you would need on site, and kind of consideration even towards the flowering room and that capacity you're going to need in the dry rooms, depending on your schedule. So, the ancillary spaces and the sizes of those to accommodate what kind of flowering space you're trying to put together is one of the big things to look out for. Now it's also how the spaces inside the facility are split up. So like you want to think about, even from the IPM perspective, the pest management perspective, where, you don't want to be putting veg rooms right next to flower rooms and really just separated around the facility, because you may be doing some sprays in some rooms where, you're not allowed to do those sprays in the others, or you just don't want that kind of contamination. So you want to kind of segregate your facilities to accommodate, specifically from that standpoint, the IPM program that you're running there. Now also with segregating spaces, it's about, how are your rooms split up to achieve that canopy, right? There's a little bit of a sweet spot in there when it comes to, this size of room indoor, that you're really looking to pack canopy into. I'm always around like 1,500 square feet, or give or take a few hundred square feet. Mm-hmm. But you want to, you think about your schedule with the plants whenever you're even considering the number of flower rooms that you're going to have in the facility, right? If you have 3 flower rooms versus 4, it's going to be much easier for operations, because your harvest is going to be on the same day, basically the same day every 3 weeks, right? 4 rooms, that starts breaking it up, and then you'll find a harvest on a Saturday at some point. That's an optimal time, So you're either at that point you're considering chopping down a plant early or leaving it for the weekend, Mm-hmm. So, it's the same thing going up to, 9 rooms or 8 rooms, you'd be harvesting every week. So, looking at how you break those rooms up and what the implications for the operations are. Now, one of the biggest things that I do going through with Stauderfish, going through all of these designs, is that the operations are considered to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, this is a reasonable amount of canopy. For that example, it's a reasonable amount of canopy. It'd be great if we had 3 rooms with that. So we break it up into those 3 rooms to accommodate our scheduling. Because, we're really doing a plant factory type of thing here.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, I think when we're talking about, kind of overshooting and being overly aggressive, I know a lot of people they forget about the ancillary spaces, like you mentioned. And, when it comes to making room for, your water storage or your HVAC or your environmental systems, I guess, explain to me as a total beginner, right, the process of selecting the right systems, but also environmental hardware for my facility. Let's just say I have 3 flower rooms, right? And, how should I go about scaling that up if I need to?
Yeah. No, I feel you. Well, I mean, the biggest thing is there's a lot of different, environmental tracking softwares and sensor hardware and software and everything else that's out there, especially for cannabis these days. But the biggest thing to look out for with that kind of stuff is that, you've built this facility, right? That's, it's costed possibly, millions of dollars, right? You need to know not only that the drivers of the facility, of the car or whatever, are well trained, and that's your employees and stuff. So like SOPs are big. But at the same time, if you're driving around in your car, you got like service engine soon lights that'll pop up like if something goes wrong, you know what I mean? And it's kind of the same thing in this facility. You need to know when, your people can't really do anything right off the bat, or your people aren't affecting your parameters in the environment of these rooms. You need to know when there is a problem, because that could indicate like an equipment failure and stuff like that. So real-time kind of cloud-based login from anywhere, tracking on your environmentals in each and every one of the grow rooms is an essential thing these days, because things lights can stay on overnight and the HVAC can stay off overnight. You can cook out those plants real easy if you didn't know about it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, we need to have those alerts when it's coming outside of the parameters in which we need for the growth of the plant and stuff, even at night. You know what I mean? These plants are still metabolizing at night. So it's really a 24/7 thing, at least in terms of having that oversight over those conditions inside the rooms. But it goes as far as we're not just tracking the temperature and kind of relative humidity inside of these rooms. We're tracking the CO2 that the plants are feeling. We're also tracking like light intensity and things like that with these sensors. And even all the way down to the root zones. So we'll know kind of what the EC and what the water content of those roots are. So, with that, even if it's, it doesn't come to you via an alert or something like that, then, you can still kind of make some presumptions as like, hey, my plants are totally dry. Maybe my fertigation system is not working. You know what I mean? So kind of, having that oversight is the biggest thing. Like I say, there's a lot of like providers and stuff out there for that kind of stuff. But, whenever we're doing that kind of tracking, it's good to have, whoever you choose. It's good to have some sort of analytics and data tracking over those rooms as well. So, if something negatively impacts one of the crops that's in one of the rooms, like a HVAC system goes out or lights don't turn on or whatever, you can look back and see what the impact that is on the harvest of that room. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then analytics, meaning, you're not going to be able to basically, you you don't measure VPD, you calculate it. So the VPD, and that's inside that room, the vapor pressure deficit, and how the best indicator on how those plants are going to be performing is going to be a combination of temperature, humidity, and leaf temp and things like that. So you want to have your tracking software, your environmental monitoring and stuff, have some analytics towards giving you the like real time, just quick and dirty of what the conditions are inside of these rooms. So,
yeah, I think it's really important to know the full like input versus output, right? And I think that's something that the analytics will give you, but it's not something that everybody focuses on, or gives you out of the bat in terms of hardware vendors. And I'm curious for, selecting the right hardware, what are some criteria that kind of a hardware company needs to pass to meet your standards and so that you can fully trust their hardware and that it's, whether that's alerts or automation or crop steering?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the crop steering component, implies that, you need like, the number one thing, which is integration of that hardware with everything else, right? Ideally, your environmental kind of software hardware combo should be able to control the all of the equipment inside of that facility. So the same software and hardware that is tracking the room conditions and whatnot still would allow you to jump on your phone and basically change up parameters that would affect the HVAC, affect the lights, affect the CO2, and even the fertigation side. So having that integration with the other components of the facility is one of the most important things there. So in terms of like the hardware and how that hardware links up, you don't want to have like control boxes inside of these grow rooms. For the love of God, put them on the outside where humidity really isn't at, and stuff like that on the micro side. But macro side, it needs to everything needs to talk together in order to really give the good picture of what's going on in the room. Now, the flip side of that would be a disintegrated piece of hardware, like for the environmental side, where you log into that and you see that your temperatures and your humidity is getting out of control, right? You should be able to adjust that from that piece of software, right, through the environmental controller, as opposed to having to jump out of that app and then jump into your HVAC app that they claim is 10 times better. You know what I mean? So then you're kind of fighting things and making systems work, not necessarily against each other, but definitely not together. You know what I mean? So the integration component is huge.
And, if, let's say I were to choose one of these hardware vendors and they have kind of a fully integrated, software controller with the hardware, all the different variables, temperature, humidity, CO2, VPD, all calculating, controllable. How should I ensure that, it's properly installed and maintained over the years?
The maintenance, I've always, for the most part, like these guys will, at least some, the reputable guys and vendors on this end will, provide some sort of kind of commissioning support and stuff like that, just to make sure everything is linked up correctly from the get-go. When it comes to like the maintenance on it, I've always seen that, it's on the cultivator, it's on the operator or the facility manager and stuff like that, right? But I've always had and always recommend having kind of independent and just decentralized kind of sensors in the rooms. And it would be, something as simple as like an outdoor kind of thermometer, right? A digital outdoor thermometer that detects those things, just to kind of check against those sensors that are within the room. But at the same time, it's not about having one of the kind of main environmental sensors in the room. I always like to kind of treat rooms, if they're more or less a square, like a quadrant type of system. So I'll put 4 sensors in there. That way we know and you can look into each one of those, you will know when one of them is significantly out of range of the others. And that'll imply that there's a problem with that sensor. Maybe it's got clogged, maybe, who knows, right? But go check it. So, with that, it's about kind of, your sensor density, will play towards, giving you the indication that there's a problem on that end. But at the same time, having the decentralized and disintegrated, like temperature sensors, like outdoor stuff, in those rooms just for a quick check, I do the same thing with light intensity. I do the same thing. Because, if you have a lighting system that's degrading in intensity 5% per year, then by year 4, it's going to be, significantly off what you started with. And you may not know why your yields are going down, right? So I check the light intensity as well. It's just about kind of looking at it from a perspective of what does this plant have, like if it was just planted outside, right? It's going to be dealing with the air temp, like humidity there. That's going to dictate some things. The sunlight's going to dictate some things. Water table, like the amount of precipitation and things, that's going to dictate like the water end of everything. So it's just kind of trying to replicate those conditions and then verify that those conditions are still being met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. And are you, looking, like, I guess at your rooms every day, or, what are some good rules of thumb, other than just, your environmental controls has, like, obviously, alerts when it hits a certain maximum minimum thresholds, right, for each of the variables. But are there any like rules of thumb that, it's like you're looking at or you're eyeing these certain variables at a time during the life cycle, and as the plant progresses, veg, flower, and then, late flower, are there any specific variables you're looking into?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest ones, and easiest for kind of trimmers and things like that that'll be in and out of the rooms, is just including it into like the SOPs of that person's work, right? So one of the things is, I break SOPs down through Stauderfish and delivering SOPs to different groups around the country. I break it down in terms of, what are your dailies? What are your weeklies? What are your monthlies? Right. In terms of like tasks and things. One of the dailies is that you're checking and verifying that the environmental software is reading correctly, given what, we're seeing inside the room meter. So it's an everyday thing, that these folks are going to be kind of checking in and making sure that the rooms are within parameters. But, when I say every day, there's definitely going to be people in and out over the weekends and things like that. But mostly, during the week when prime operations are kind of going on. But yeah, man, it's an everyday thing. And, to be honest with you, it's, you just got to watch out for almost becoming, obsessed and neurotic about it, because, I've been, not only, that guy that's sitting there, like looking at the rooms and stuff, just like every 15 minutes, because I'm like, but also getting alerts at 3 a.m. and driving through blizzards to go and smack like a compressor in an HVAC system with a hammer. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't have known to go down there and do that if it wasn't for that monitoring. So.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of like establishing a healthy routine, right?
Yeah.
You like walk me through like, a day in the life. What's your series of checks you would take when using an environmental system to manage a cultivation facility, or give a team, what are the different checks you're making if you have, let's say, 3 flowering rooms? Right.
Well, everybody that's going into that flowering room is going to have, in the back of their head that, we're checking the temps, we're checking the meters and everything like that. So we got, the biggest things that we're checking are, probably in order: temperature and humidity, and how that relates to BPD in the plants, CO2, light levels, and then, root zone conditions. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're cross-checking every day, and almost every single time that folks are going to end up walking in and out of those rooms, where, they're checking what does it say on the outside of the door on our iPad that like gives all the conditions and everything from our environmental sensors. Checking that with, the meter that you see as you're walking into the room to do the tasks that you got to do for that day. So, normally, I have one of those sensors in every room. Root zone sensors kind of sporadically around the room, just depending upon the fertigation strategy and whatnot. But we would be checking those as well for like spot sensors and into the root zone for water content and EC levels and whatnot. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's important is kind of keeping or having the entire staff like keep conscious towards problems, right? That you could see, and then when you're in those rooms, and then see where the origination of those problems begin. So like, if your fertigation is out or something's clogged in a specific row, then you'll be able to tell with root zone monitoring and stuff like that. But if it's out for the whole room, then you have an indication there that this is why my humidity is dropping, right? Without temperature and everything else. So you're not introducing water to that room. Even something as basic as like, the first guy that's coming into the facility for the day, the alarm's on backup power, but this guy, if he flips that switch, dude, in like the office, like to come in and that light doesn't turn on, you can pretty much bet that the lights aren't on for the plants. You know what I mean? So like, it's just kind of using those, indicators, both simple and, when you've been in and out of those rooms 30, 40 times, to make presumptions on, where the problem lies. So it's a daily thing though, man. It's always constant.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I'm curious about, kind of as a bonus question here, it's outside of really facility design, right? When we've been talking a lot about the inputs into the growing process and in the plants, in terms of the actual yields and how that yield performs on the market. Something that we always say here at FloEnvy is when we put the data together between the sales and cultivation, that's when we can make smarter decisions, really putting any data together. And so, how are you, let's say you have a sales team, how are you reading into the sales numbers to determine, your next harvest as well as the strains you select? And obviously that could, affect also your environmental targets and schedule.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the like using the sales figures to kind of go back and look at the grow. With that, I mean, you're definitely going to kind of discover what, are your hot sellers in terms of your strains and stuff like that. So what kind of to keep around and rotate out. But man, one of the problems is that in some of these states, they'll take everything you have, like they're, like your entire harvest and whatnot. It doesn't matter what it is because everybody's just hurting for flour and product. You know what I mean? So with that, I would expect the sales guy's job to be very easy. You know what I mean? But once it really starts getting down to creating the relationships with folks, then you may end up in situations where you're doing like contract grow type of stuff. It's growing specifically for a dispensary and it's already sold by the time you cut a clone. And you're trying to meet certain needs of theirs. Now on my side, whenever I was doing the grow, that was always advantageous. You know what I mean? To have, the yield that we're looking at and projecting to be already sold. But going back to the cultivation side, we would link up, like you say, I mean, like correlating the data to more and more things is more and more valuable. So like we can correlate kind of some environmental data to what kind of quantities are sold by those sales guys into dispensaries, right? And like I say, like if we're looking back into the like historical record of a room, and we see that like for 2 days the HVAC like was outside of control, right? Way hot. Then we can presume that maybe on our next harvest, we should have a a better yield if we keep those parameters in check. Or this is what affected our yield and this is why we missed our mark, right? So we can do that to address problems, and then also kind of experiment as well. So like if you're cranking up your light intensity by 15-20% on your lights, if you're not running them up to that point, then your environment should change to accommodate that. Now, it just so happens that with like LED lighting and how plants respond to high intensity light, like the metabolism is going to go up, your fertigation is probably going to go up a little bit, and CO2 use, and as well as like your optimal temperature inside of those rooms is going to go up to heat up those leaves and reach a proper VPD. So you can do the experimentation on that end. I would never recommend kind of changing 5 parameters at once, because then you don't know kind of what did what, you know what I mean, good or bad. So but yeah, with the sales side, it should dictate basically what we're growing, and that corresponds to what we're selling. You know what I mean? So what's selling, let's continue growing it and optimize that strain, that cultivar, and everything else. So,
yeah, I mean, not everybody sometimes finds themselves in market conditions that are, fortunate enough where you can grow and know that it's gold when it's,
oh yeah, I know. Like I loved like my green crack back at Rocky Mountain Green. Loved it. It made big gulps, man, huge nugs. It was nuts. And it was really, it was a short flowering strain and everything like that. But, people just weren't about it. On my side, the production was high. It was really quick. It was the cogs on that pound of flower from a green crack were higher than anything else. But, if you can't sell it, you can't sell it, so I'm with you there. So that's one of the strains that got rotated out after a bit.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. Sure. I would have kept around one just for personal use, but
I feel like when it comes to, you said you don't recommend changing all the 5 variables at once, but sometimes you can't help it, right? You have to change, you have to adjust your light in addition to swapping out the strain. There already, that's 2 variables.
Totally. Yeah.
So I guess in terms of somebody that's just getting started, let's say they're just aiming for a few strains, maybe a few hybrids, a few sativas, maybe an indica. How do you think, like, how long do you think you should wait before you give a strain a shot and adjust based on the market?
I would give it until you're sure that your facility is stable. You know what I mean? Because if you're starting a new place and installing a whole bunch of hardware into that and things like that, then there's going to be gremlins to figure that out, right? So I wouldn't necessarily base like the first 2 harvests on as this is exactly what this strain is capable of producing. You know what I mean? Assuming that you're going to have just a couple of problems like coming out of the gate. So I would give it 2 harvests before, or give it till the 3rd harvest to really see what you're getting from the cultivars you started with, and then start changing things up after that when you know that you got full control over that facility when it comes to the cultivable environments. So,
and I guess just curious for the audience, how many different strains were you growing at Rocky Mountain Green? Do you feel like it was too much or too little?
Yeah, dude, like you always start with too much, and you just find yourself killing things off. But we started on the medical side before medical became rec, or before rec came about or whatever. And then I think on the medical side, we had 12 or 14 strains. One of which was a DJ Shorts blueberry, which was killer, dude. It smelled like blueberry muffins. But then on the rec side, there was also another 6 to 8 strains. So, dude, throughout the facility, 20 strains, below 20 strains. But for that size and given what we were harvesting and things along those lines. That was too much along those lines. I got some 14,000 square foot places, 20,000 all the way down to 12 and 10 and 8,000 square foot places that are running a dozen strains total.
Got it.
So doing a little bit of experimentation with kind of the new strains coming about. I would always be looking around, but it's about making sure, number one, that you're bringing in clean plants into the place, and then number two, it's hitting what you said, what you can sell, right? But to be honest with you, like, it's worth looking around, because just like you have people breeding for high THC levels for generations and generations of cannabis plants. Nowadays, you got folks that are breeding for, like other cannabinoids, of course, but like shorter flowering times, right? So if you can bring a plant to maturity in a shorter amount of time and blooms, then all of a sudden you're doing like 6.5 harvests a year. And that makes a massive difference. So, that's just an example that there's a lot of innovation going on the genetic side of as well. So.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
We'll have to get into that one.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
Clone selection and clone vendors. I'm sure you got a lot experience
tissue
working
culture,
with different ones.
Tissue culture stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is, yeah.
Tissue culture, I mean, yeah, that's for sure a different topic as well. But yeah, I appreciate it, Jordan. I know we got dropped a lot of nuggets, knowledge for
man. I go off on tangents, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. I know we got through everything, we pretty much wanted to cover, which is just what is sustainable design and, the fundamentals of facility design, environmental controls. So yeah, appreciate your time.
Happy to talk to anybody that wants, kind of some either one-on-one or like a little bit more explanation or less it's more tangent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'll put your information link in the bio and also the description, and people can reach out, check out stauderfish.com. Reach out to Jordan, the owner, and of course his team has been, great to work with. I've personally worked with them many times. So
we got some projects we're talking about here, Michael. So, that's the next call.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool.
See you, Ned. Take care. Bye.